Before the first light of dawn could reach the pine forest, the darkness was already ripped apart by the ragged, hoarse breathing of two young Apache girls. Nalia, the older sister at 19, with eyes as sharp and black as mountain stone, was hanging from a thick rope looped over a tall branch. Her neck was drawn tight, and every breath was pure agony. Beside her, Sira, her younger sister, around 16, had her arms tied out wide, the tension in the rope making her slender shoulders tremble violently from the pain. Their thin bodies swayed in the cold forest air. The scent of pine sap, damp soil, and blood mixed into a suffocating haze that clung to everything. At the base of the tree, where morning dew still clung to the leaves, Garrett Crowley stood with his arms crossed. His pale blue eyes gleamed with a twisted sense of pleasure. He tilted his head, watching the two Apache girls struggle as if he were savoring a performance made just for him. "Look at you," he whispered, his voice groaning like the splintering of rotted wood. "I want to see your souls shatter into pieces." Slowly, little by little, a single tear slid down Sira's cheek, blending into the bruises spreading across her neck. Nalia looked at her sister with eyes as cold as steel, yet filled with despair. They had once believed they could escape him. But now, the deep forest had become their grave. The rope tightened with every small movement they made, stealing away what little air they could grasp. Nalia's throat burned. Her lungs felt like they were being crushed. Sira's breath had faded to faint whispers, so soft they were almost gone. There was no one around, just two young souls suspended in the forest, waiting for death like it was a sentence already carved in stone. The first light of the new day swept across the pine forest, turning the morning mist into drifting silver veils. Will Dawson, the man everyone in town called Old Oak, was riding his gray horse in search of a stray that had gone missing during the night. But this morning, something was different. A faint sound almost like a wire snapping under tension whispered through the tall trees. Will froze. A soft moan followed, dragging out like the final breath of someone barely hanging on. Instincts honed by a lifetime on the frontier kicked in instantly. He tied his horse to a tree and silently stepped into the deeper forest. And as he pushed past the last veil of leaves, what he saw stopped him cold. Two Apache girls were hanging in midair, the ropes biting into their necks, their feet just barely scraping the ground. Their faces had turned a bluish gray, and their lips were cracked and so dry they looked like there was no blood left to bleed. Will did not stop to think. He ran. One hand caught Nalia's body while the other yanked the knife from his belt and slashed through the rope. It snapped with a harsh pop, and her body collapsed into his arms like a bag of sand. He laid her gently on the ground, then rushed to Sira, the younger girl flailing like a bird caught in a snare. The tighter she struggled, the tighter the rope dug into her neck. "What the hell is going on here?" Will muttered under his breath. His hands trembled slightly, but his movements never slowed. He cut the second rope. Sira fell, coughing violently, her whole body shaking with spasms from the long deprivation of oxygen. Will dropped to his knees beside her, quickly loosening the binds around her wrists, checking their breathing, pressing his ear against each chest. "Come on now, do not give up. Breathe in. Good, just like that." Nalia's eyes cracked open, clouded but still flickering with a trace of life. Sira clung tightly to his shirt, as if it was the only thing left anchoring her to the world. Will knew these Apache girls had not been attacked by animals, and this was no accident. Someone had done this. A sick bastard. A demon in human skin. He had not even begun to understand the full story when a sharp sound rang out. The click of a rifle being cocked. From beyond the tree line, Garrett Crowley stepped into view, his eyes cold, like a predator denied its prey. Well, old man," he sneered. "You should not have touched my property." Will barely had time to turn and shield the girls before the gunshot tore through the pine forest. Pain, heat, a warm river of blood spilled from his side. But Will Dawson stayed on his feet, and he knew, even if it cost him his blood, he would not leave these girls behind. The gunshot thundered through the forest, sending the crows perched atop the pine trees into a frenzy, wings flapping in all directions. Will Dawson stumbled, one hand clutching the wound bleeding at his side, the other dragging Nalia and Sira to their feet. There was no time to feel pain. Only one choice: run. "Go, get on the horse," Will roared, his voice hoarse but full of grit. His gray horse flinched at the sound of gunfire, neighing in alarm, but it held its ground. Nalia could barely move, practically dragging herself, while Sira trembled uncontrollably, her breath broken by sharp jolts of pain still ripping through her throat. Will hoisted them both into the saddle, then grabbed the reins with whatever strength he had left. Behind them, Garrett Crowley let out a low, twisted chuckle, slowly chambering another round. "No one takes them from me. No one." Will snapped the reins. The horse bolted like a bullet. Wind ripped across their faces, carrying the sound of desperate breathing as the two girls clung tightly to Will from behind. Nalia wrapped her arms around her sister, holding Sira steady as the horse thundered over pine roots, jagged rocks, and shrubs sharp as blades. Their heartbeats pounded wildly in their chests, merging with the rapid thud of hooves like war drums. But behind them, hoofbeats followed. Fast, relentless, deadly. Garrett was riding, rifle in hand, hunting without pause. A bullet zipped past Will's ear, slamming into the trunk of a tree ahead, splintering the bark into a cloud of wood chips. Nalia screamed, pulling Sira down to shield her from the shot. Will glanced back, his jaw clenched tight. "Hold on. I am getting you to the ranch." Blood from his wound dripped down, soaking into the saddle and staining Nalia's hands. She gripped his shoulder, her voice cracked and thick. "You are bleeding." "I am fine," Will hissed through clenched teeth, though his face had gone ghostly pale. "We just need to make it to the ranch." Behind them, Garrett started laughing, his voice echoing through the woods like a mad animal. "Run. Keep running. I like this game." He raised the rifle again. Another shot rang out. Will leaned to the side just in time. The bullet sliced past him, close enough to knock him nearly out of the saddle. His horse screamed in panic, almost stumbling over a tree root. Nalia and Sira held on to each other tightly, their faces streaked with tears and dirt. The forest path opened up, sloping gently down toward the valley, where Will's ranch lay hidden behind a cluster of willows. All they had to do was cross the dry creek. "Come on," Will whispered. The horse galloped hard, kicking up a cloud of dust as it charged across the creek bed. And right then another gunshot exploded, striking the ground beneath them. Pebbles and debris flew up, slicing Nalia's leg and cutting across Sira's cheek. But they had made it past the forest edge. Garrett was forced to pull his horse back, the creek now deeper behind them. He cursed loudly, throwing a furious glare at the small ranch in the distance. Meanwhile, Will, nearly spent, managed to help the girls down. He pulled them inside, slammed the door shut, and dropped the heavy bolt across it. In that moment, all three of them understood one thing. They were only safe, for now. The nightmare was not over, and it would return, tonight. Inside the silent ranch house, only the sound of wind slipping through the cracks and the ragged breaths of three people struggling to recover could be heard. Will sat slumped in a wooden chair, panting, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. The gunshot wound in his side throbbed deep into his bones. But all he could look at were the two Apache girls curled up in blankets on the floor like wounded fawns. Sira was still trembling. Nalia was breathing hard, but there was a glint of light in her eyes. When Will handed them some water, the sisters bowed their heads in thanks, their English broken and hesitant. I need to know what happened," Will said, his voice raw. "Why that man wants to hurt you, and why?" Nalia glanced at her sister, then gave a small nod, as if she knew it was time for the truth to be spoken. "Garrett Crowley." Nalia said his name like swallowing a blade. He is our stepfather." Will's brow furrowed, his anger rising visibly. Nalia continued, her voice strained from the rope burns on her throat. "After our mother died during a harsh winter, he took the house. Said he would take care of us. But that was the first lie the devil ever told." Sira closed her eyes, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Nalia squeezed her sister's hand, as if trying to pass strength into her. "He locked us in the cabin. Day after day, he beat us, tied us up, said he wanted to shape us into obedient girls. Many times he hung Sira from a tree, just to see how scared she would get." Will clenched his jaw. His hands trembled not from pain, but from rage. "We endured it, for years," Nalia went on. "But then, he planned to sell us to white men. We overheard him. That night, I decided to run. I had to take Sira and escape." Sira finally spoke, her voice a whisper like wind. "We ran in the dark. but he was faster. He caught me first. Nalia tried to fight back, but she stopped, her small shoulders shaking. Nalia wrapped her arms around her, gently patting her back. He hung us both up, to punish us, to teach us that no one escapes him. Nalia looked down at her neck, the red mark still deep in her skin. We thought we were going to die there. Will lowered his head. One hand pressed to his chest as if trying to hold back the rising fury inside. He knew the Apache people had suffered enough, but these two young girls beaten and tortured like prey by a white man that made his blood boil. Then Nalia looked straight into Will's eyes, her gaze proud despite the tremble still in her body. You saved us. You are the reason we are alive. Will took a deep breath, his old eyes hard as stone. As long as I am still standing, Garrett Crowley will not lay another hand on either of you. But outside, the night sky was growing darker by the second. Nalia was the first to notice. Sierra gripped her sister's hand, her whole body tensing, because they both knew one thing. Once the sun went down, Garrett would come back. And this time, he would not let his possessions slip away again. Thank you for being here. If this story brought back memories of dusty evenings, of hoofbeats echoing in your chest, then please subscribe to my channel. So every day, we can sit together again, and I will tell you another tale from the Old West. Night fell faster than usual, as if the sky itself knew something terrifying was about to descend on this land. Will Dawson stood by the window, one hand trembling slightly from pain, but his eyes remained sharp as steel. He checked his old rifle, the one that had been with him for over 30 years, then placed a second handgun on the table, where the oil lamp cast a flickering circle of warm yellow light. In the corner of the room, Nalia and Sierra were huddled beneath thick blankets, not from the cold, but from the fear slithering through them like a venomous snake beneath the skin. They said nothing, but Will could see in their eyes the same thought running through his own. Garrett was coming, and he would not be coming empty-handed. The wind howled outside, sounding like the screams of trapped spirits from the deep woods. In that heavy silence, every sound made the heart jump. Then, a dry branch snapped. Sierra shot upright, her eyes wide like a trapped animal cornered in the dark. It is him, she whispered. Will leaned toward the window, holding his breath. Through the darkness, he saw signs only a man who had lived his whole life in the wild would recognize. Fresh footprints pressed into the soft earth, sticky patches of scraped pine sap on the bark, a sign someone had hidden there before moving again. Nalia stood too, her hand gripping the hunting knife Will had given them. He may have been watching us since the moment the sun went down, she murmured. Will nodded. He is waiting for the right moment. Footsteps began to echo louder, now slow, heavy, as if Garrett wanted them to hear. A deliberate sound, laced with threat. Nalia tightened her grip on her sister's hand. Will double-check the door bolt one more time. Then, a thunderous slam hit the back wall of the ranch like a lightning strike. The horses in the barn whinnied in terror. Will jumped to his feet, raising the rifle toward the sound. He wants us afraid, Nalia said, her voice dropping low. No, Will replied. He wants us to open the door. The oil lamp flickered. Wind roared outside, making the house tremble with each gust. Then, silence. A silence so complete, so unnatural. It was as if the forest and sky were holding their breath. Nalia edged closer to Will. Sierra pressed herself against the wall, both hands clenched around the knife, her palms slick with sweat. Will turned, about to say something when, boom, the back door of the ranch exploded inward, as if a beast had slammed straight into it. Wood shards flew in every direction, sawdust choking the air. Sierra screamed. Nalia yanked her out of the way just as Garrett's massive silhouette emerged through the dust, his breathing loud and heavy like metal scraping across the ground. His eyes glowed with that sick, twisted light Nalia knew all too well. I told you, he growled, his voice so low it sent chills through the spine. No one takes you from me. Will raised his rifle. Nalia pushed Sierra behind her. And in that instant, the nightmare truly began. The back door of the ranch was still rattling when Will pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked through the darkness, the muzzle flash lighting up the room for a split second. The bullet cut through the air and struck Garrett in the arm, making him stumble. But Garrett Crowley was not the kind of man to stop at a single bullet. He bent forward, snarling like a wounded animal, then charged at Will with crazed strength. Will was thrown backward, his spine slamming against the edge of the table. Pain surged through his body. nearly making him drop the rifle. But survival instincts kicked in, and he raised the gun again. Before he could fire, bang! Garrett had already drawn his pistol and fired a second shot. Will tried to twist away, but it was too late. The bullet tore into his left shoulder, sending a wave of numbness through his arm. He dropped to one knee, blood soaking through his shirt. Nalia, Sira, run! He did not finish the sentence. Garrett ripped the rifle from his hands and tossed it across the room. Sira screamed. Nalia pulled her sister back toward the wall, but Garrett had already seen them. He turned, a deadly grin spreading across his face. You escaped me once, but this time, I will tie you up right here in front of this house. He stepped toward them, each footfall deliberate, his eyes cold as ice. Nalia shoved Sira behind her. Her body was trembling, but she stood firm between him and her sister. Will tried to get up, lunging at Garrett from behind. But Garrett spun around and punched him hard, sending Will crashing to the wooden floor, the air knocked from his lungs. This old man, Garrett growled, full of contempt, should have minded his own damn business. Nalia saw Will fall. Her eyes darkened not just with fear, but with years of rage finally boiling over. She lunged, trying to stab Garrett's arm with the knife, but he was faster. He swatted her away like a dry leaf. Sira screamed and ran to her sister's side. Garrett turned back, storming toward them like a black storm. Then, just as he bent down to grab Nalia by the hair, crack! A sharp sound split the air. A surprise attack. A flash of fire from an iron lamp. Sira. She had grabbed the oil lamp and thrown all her strength into that swing. Garrett staggered back, his eyes wild with pain. Nalia seized the moment. With every ounce of strength left in her, she pushed him to the ground. The two sisters pounced, grappling with him, their ragged breaths and pounding limbs echoing through the small ranch house. Will tried to rise, but his vision blurred from blood loss. He could barely make out the three figures tangled together in the dim oil light. Nalia swatted away Garrett's arm and raised the knife. Sira gripped his other arm, holding it down. Garrett thrashed like a wild animal, but the two Apache girls were no longer trembling children in the woods. They were fighting for their lives and for each other. And in that moment, the nightmare that had haunted them for years finally reached its breaking point. Garrett Crowley thrashed wildly, trying to break free from the two girls pinning him to the floor. His breathing was loud and ragged, like thunder rumbling beneath a storm. But this time, he was no longer the hunter, he was panicking. He had not expected the two possessions he had always belittled to fight back with such fury. Nalia held down his arm, her whole body shaking, not just from fear, but from the years of rage finally breaking through. Sira pressed on his shoulders, gasping for air from the strain and exhaustion. "Let me go," Garrett roared, trying to shove them off. But this time, he no longer held the power of an oppressor. This time, he was facing victims who refused to stay silent. Nalia grabbed the iron lamp lying nearby on the floor. It was still hot and heavy. She gripped it tight, her eyes darkening as they locked onto the face of the man who had destroyed their lives. "For everything you did," Nalia whispered, her voice raspy from the pain in her throat. "For our mother, for Sira, for me." She raised the lamp high. Will, slumped against the wall and barely conscious, managed to croak out, "Nalia, do not do something you will regret for the rest of your life." But Nalia barely heard him. In her mind, she saw only Sira hanging from a tree, their mother crying in helplessness, years of living like shadows. The iron lamp shook in her hands, hovering just inches from Garrett's head. "Sis!" Sira cried out, her voice cracking with panic. Nalia froze, but her hands kept trembling. "Let me go," Garrett gasped, forcing out a mocking smile, though his voice quivered with fear. You do not have the guts." One final sentence, the same kind he had used to keep them afraid for so long, became the last drop that broke something inside Nalia. She tightened her grip, her shoulders tensed, her eyes burned red with fury. But just as Nalia prepared to strike, Sira wrapped her arms around her sister's arm. "Nalia, do not do it," she screamed, tears bursting from her eyes like a broken dam. "If you kill him, you will not be you anymore. Let him live. Let the law punish him. That is how you make him suffer." Nalia froze, her whole body stiffened. Her breathing came in ragged bursts, as if she were being choked. The lamp dropped to the floor, rolling across the wood before coming to a stop with a hollow clang in the still air. Sierra clung to her, her small arms firm and steady. "I do not want to lose you, in any way." Nalia collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. The two sisters held each other, trembling from exhaustion and from everything they had just endured. Garrett lay unconscious, stripped of the power he had once used to torment others. He was not dead, and that was his true punishment, to face justice under the law. Will exhaled deeply, resting his head against the wall, his eyes filled with both relief and pride. At last, the two Apache girls had not let the darkness lead them astray. Even as they stood at the very edge of the abyss, dawn broke slowly that morning, as if even the sky needed to catch its breath after a long night choked by nightmares. Golden light slipped through every gap in the wooden walls of the small ranch house, casting a warm glow over three exhausted bodies who, despite everything, were still alive. Will Dawson sat slumped against the wall, his wound now wrapped with clean cloths by Nalia. His face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes still burned with the resolve of a man who had chosen to stand on the side of justice no matter the cost. Nalia stepped out of the kitchen with a bowl of warm water, and Sierra followed behind, gently laying a blanket over Will. "Thank you," Will whispered. Nalia simply nodded. There was no need for many words. What they had survived last night was enough to turn three strangers into a family, if only for this moment. In the corner of the room, Garrett Crowley lay motionless. His hands were tightly bound with the same rope Will once used for horses. He was still breathing, but barely. The events of the night had stripped him of his cruelty, his arrogance. He was no longer the storm that had torn through the lives of two young girls. He was now just a criminal, awaiting judgment. Nalia stared at him for a long while. Her eyes no longer burned with hatred. What remained was weariness, and a deep, quiet pain that only those who have stood at the edge of darkness can truly understand. Sierra touched her sister's hand. "We did the right thing." Nalia nodded gently. "Yes, we did." Those words were not just for Sierra to hear, but for her own soul as well. Will tried to stand, but Nalia caught him. "You do not need to push yourself." Will gave a soft smile, the kind only a man who had seen a lifetime could give. "I am fine. I just want to be standing when the sun comes up." The three of them stepped out onto the front porch. The morning light blanketed the valley in golden hues that took your breath away. Sunbeams stretched out like threads of silk, touching Nalia and Sierra's shoulders, making them look like two young warriors stepping out of an Apache legend. Sierra took a deep breath, the scent of fresh earth filling her lungs. She turned to her sister, holding her hand tightly. We are really alive, right?" Nalia looked up at the sky, then at her sister. "Not just alive. We saved ourselves." Will looked at the girls, his voice steady and warm. "You two are stronger than anyone I have ever met. And now, the law will take care of the rest." Sierra turned to glance back into the house, where Garrett lay bound. "I do not want him to disappear into the dark like he never existed. I want him to face the truth, in front of everyone. I want him judged the right way." Nalia smiled a real smile, the first in years. "That is justice." And the three of them, an old rancher and two young Apache girls, stood together in the morning light. No more ropes, no more shadows of the forest, no more hunters behind them. Only dawn, and three souls who had walked through death to reclaim their light. Even though darkness had trampled them, even though they had stood on the very edge where hatred could have devoured their spirits, they chose to step back. They chose to hold on to what was still human inside their hearts. Not out of weakness, but because they were strong enough to know revenge would never heal them. They chose the light, a harder path, a more painful one, but a cleaner one. And in that choice, they became true survivors. Souls who would not let darkness define their lives. It is an honor to share this story with you. I truly hope you find peace and happiness, no matter where you are in life. I love you. My dear audience of Wild West storytelling, tell me what this story meant to you. Leave a comment below. Type the number 1 if you enjoyed this tale. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories from the Wild West.